Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Raskin. I'm a research scientist here at the GW Cancer Center, focusing on patient-reported outcomes, and I am project director of the Generation and Translation of Evidence project, also known as the GATE, which is a cancer community of practice, which is the mechanism that hosts these Ask the Expert sessions. We are extremely excited to have you with us today, to have our three experts, Sarah Chang, Cindy Cisneros, and Deborah Madden, on tap to speak with you in just a moment about how to get involved in research as a survivor. And we are excited to have 20 participants and counting today, which really suggests how much desire there is to hear more about this topic. A couple of notes. Historically, we have not posted an archive of our Ask the Expert sessions, and rather posted summary slides and summary notes. But there was so much response to the session today, and it appears to be kind of a novel session that we are going to record and post notes to our GATE website. That said, you are welcome, if you are kind of shy about the idea of hearing your voice recorded and posted online, you're welcome to chat questions in our chat box or our Q&A, and my dear colleague Hema will handle those two technologies, and she'll share your questions throughout the event and in the discussion that follows. The way that these Ask the Experts commonly go is that our three presenters each present for approximately 10 minutes per person, and then much of our time, a good 25 or so minutes, is spent in discussion and Q&A, that you are welcome to raise your hand when we get to that portion, and we'll call on you and unmute your actual line, or you can chat or Q&A your questions into Hema. So I just want to make a couple of notes to start. I've been reading everyone's registration and learning more about what you're interested in hearing about today. And I want to clarify that this question about where to start as a survivor who wants to get involved in research has come up among a number of you, and we're so glad, because that's precisely what we're going to be talking about today. It's literally the title of Deborah's presentation. So we think it'll be very informative. I also want to mention that while the title of our Ask the Expert is How to Get Involved in Research as a Survivor, there are a number of opportunities for caregivers and family members of survivors to get involved in research. And while those aren't a focus of today's work, certainly many of the resources that we'll share speak to that question that a number of you asked. We are going to be presenting primarily the national picture with some specific examples from Cindy and Deborah's experience. The national picture will kind of guide you to some resources to look in your local setting. I know some of you have asked about local clinical trials or other local studies, and certainly you can follow the resources that we share at the national level to look locally. And I do also want to note, I used the phrase clinical trials to talk about people's interest in what is available locally. Certainly clinical trials will be one of the kinds of research that we'll touch on today, but it is by no means the only way to get involved in research as a survivor, and that's going to be a kind of continuing message of today, that you can get involved in leadership, in contributing comments on results, in generating research questions in the first place. And so that's really what we're going to talk about today. So let's go actually to our agenda slide. And as I mentioned, the first couple of moments we're just going to be, well, I guess I've already done a little bit of the welcome. I'll introduce each speaker before her actual presentation and give you her bio then. But let me just briefly tell you that Sarah Chang is here on behalf of Research America, which is an organization that advocates, it really marshals the voice of survivors, patients, and the American public to drive research in America. It's such an important part of our healthcare system, our understanding, and actually industry in America. So Sarah will be talking a bit about those advocacy roles and research roles. Then Deborah Madden, who is a survivor advocate with a wide variety of experience, serving in a variety of roles, will speak to her experience, and in particular, she'll be talking about some of the specific roles that agencies are looking for. And then Cindy Cisneros, who is special to us here at GW Cancer Center because she chairs an advisory board for a research study that I'm involved in, will be speaking to the experience of serving on an advisory board, and then we'll have discussion. So let me share our learning objectives for today. So we are going to talk about, we're going to meet the following learning objectives. We're going to learn about how patients and advocates and also caregivers, as I mentioned, can influence research from the initial development of questions to translations from the research space into clinical practice. We are going to understand how to become an informed consumer of medical care and how to develop a critical health literacy. And this was actually also a topic that a number of you in your registration said that you want to learn more about. So we will help you identify resources to develop those skills, which then might be adequate in and of themselves just for your own satisfaction, but might also guide your participation in research. We will discuss how cancer survivors can identify research advocacy opportunities and actually how they can also identify research participation opportunities. And we'll describe the value of incorporating survivors' voices into the research process. So now I would like to turn it over to Sarah Chang, and let me introduce you to Sarah. Sarah Chang serves as the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Research America. In her role, Ms. Chang develops and executes policy and advocacy strategies to increase public and policymaker awareness of the health and economic benefits of medical research. Prior to this role, Ms. Chang was with the Lupus Foundation of America for 10 years, most recently as the Director for Advocacy and Government Relations. During her tenure at the Lupus Foundation of America, Ms. Chang advocated to secure funding for lupus research, education, and awareness. Previously, in addition, she provided leadership on patient advocacy priorities to the foundation. And previously, she actually worked for Congressman Tom Osborne from Nebraska, which is where she hails from. So Sarah, we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you all here today. I hope everyone can hear me okay. As Sarah mentioned, my background is previously with patient advocacy, so today's topic is very exciting to me. Now in my role at Research America, however, I have some great new tools and resources in teaching researchers and scientists how to get involved in advocacy and how to speak about the importance of their work. So to get started, so Research America, our mission is to make research to improve health a higher national priority. And by working with members of Congress, elected officials, and members of the public, we want to make sure that people understand that everyone has a role in making research a priority. One of the things that we do at Research America is we are known for our public surveys, and so we commission polls with Zogby Analytics to understand more about public interest and understanding of research. So the base, to start today, I want to show you this poll that we did recently that shows that the majority of Americans agree that basic research is necessary. So it's a great starting point. A lot of people understand the importance of research. They've heard of research, and so now we just want to talk a little bit about how does that research, where does it come from and how does it begin? This slide is a little bit hard to see. Hopefully when you print it off, you'll be able to read it a little bit better. But this just lays out a basic premise for the pipeline of how the budget process works in Congress. And so, or how it's supposed to work. It is a little bit off this year, and it has been in the past. But generally, in February, Congress receives the President's budget. March, April, May, the House and Senate hold hearings on priorities in different institutions for the year. June, July, and August, the subcommittees meet. They put together their individual pieces of legislation and pass their 12 appropriations bills. The one that we usually highlight for medical research is the Labor, Health, and Human Services Subcommittee Appropriations Bill, and included in that is funding for the National Institutes of Health. So that's really where a lot of the basic funding for research will go to. Let's take a next step and talk a little bit about research. So as many of you are survivors or have loved ones who are survivors, you may have seen this picture before, and you may understand the complexity of getting treatments to market. It's a long and arduous process. So it starts off with an idea, goes through various phases of clinical trials, and hopefully, if all goes well, it brings a new treatment to the market. But the average time that it takes is about 12 years. And through that time span, it requires a lot of people to be involved and to participate and to give feedback on whether these treatments work, whether this would work in a real-world setting. And so that's where survivors such as you can come into play. So take a moment and put a face on research, and it requires everyone to participate in some form or another. So another one of our polls is looking at who has heard of clinical trials, who knows what they are, and who's participated in them. So as you can see from this slide, one kind of medical research is often referred to as clinical trials, and it looks like a wide majority of Americans have heard of clinical trials. But if we go here, most Americans have not participated in a clinical trial. And so why is that? What does that look like, and why are there so many barriers to getting Americans involved in clinical trials? Well, one of them could be that they haven't been asked to participate. According to this poll here, 7 in 10 say that their doctors and physicians haven't asked them about medical research, haven't asked them to get involved in clinical trials. And so that could be one of the barriers to why there are not more people involved in clinical trials. As Sarah mentioned, I believe that there are more resources at the end of this, but one way, if your physician has not asked if you want to participate in a clinical trial, is you can ask them, are there any clinical trials or research opportunities in my area of need? Or you can look on your own. You can go to clinicaltrials.gov, and there may be a local clinical trial that you can see that may be of interest to you. For Research America, one of the things that we do is we really teach scientists and researchers how to advocate, but that can be translated to pretty much anyone. So we have on our website Porter's Principle. Congressman John Porter was a former member of Congress, and now he is our board chair. And so he lists some of his best tips and practices for how to go and meet with your member of Congress to get more involved in the funding of medical research. And so we'll move on to learning how to advocate. So you probably are familiar with this. There are many ways to reach out to your members of Congress, your elected officials, but the best place to start is to research your policymaker. So you can go to house.gov, senate.gov. You can find out who your elected officials are, and then you can do a little bit of research on them. Do they have a district office that's close to you? Do they have coffees, lunches, town halls, anything that's near enough for you to go and meet with them or have some sort of say in a town hall? Learn about their committee assignments. What are their priorities? Do they have a healthcare connection? Do they have a cancer connection? Does someone in their family have cancer? And then you can learn a little bit more about them and learn where their priorities might be. And then find out if funding for research is addressed on their website. Then one of the next steps is to ask them for something. And so as a survivor and someone that is hopeful for more treatments, for better treatments, the best place to start is include NIH funding in their appropriations process. NIH is the basic place for all basic biomedical research. It's the lifeline for moving treatments forward, and so we ask that all members of Congress make that a high priority for them. And then you could also ask them to join a congressional caucus. There is the Research and Development Caucus, there's the National Institutes of Health Caucus. There are several health-related caucuses that you can ask if they're a member of or ask them to join. If you don't have a local town hall meeting or some way that you could meet with your member locally, you can always call their office here in Washington, D.C. You can send an email or a plain letter. They love to hear from their constituents. You can just reach out and ask, if you're going to give them a call, you can ask to speak with the legislative assistant that handles health, which is where the National Institutes of Health portfolio usually comes under. Or you can just write them a letter and tell them what it's like to be a cancer survivor, what it's like to have friends and family in your shoes, and why medical research is such an important part of your life and why it should be taken as a high priority. And then you can also request a meeting, either in the district near you, or if for some reason you happen to be in Washington, D.C., you could always call and try and set up a meeting with someone on their staff. So these are just a few tips that are best practices, but we're happy to help. If someone really wants to learn more, happy to help try and direct you in the best possible way. But I will, with that, wrap up and pass on to Cindy. And go from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Sarah again. I'm Sarah Chang. This is Sarah Raskin. Thank you so much for that introduction. I think it's so powerful to start our presentation, our Ask the Expert panel, with really a presentation on something that anyone can do. You know, some of the research roles require an application process. Some of the survivor researcher roles require an application process or, you know, kind of the right match, but research advocacy is something that any and all of us can do, literally starting as soon as we conclude this presentation. So I really appreciate that introduction, Sarah. Now we are going to invite Deborah to share her presentation on becoming a cancer research advocate, where to begin. So let me tell you a little bit about Deborah, and I know that at least one person on the line specifically wrote in that she's excited to hear from Deborah. So Deborah Madden is a two-time cancer survivor. She was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma as a young adult, and nearly 20 years later with breast cancer, which was thought to be secondary to the radiation she had received for her original cancer treatment. She is an active and, I would say, prolific cancer research advocate who is a member of numerous cancer support and research organizations, including the ECOG-ACRIN Cancer Research Group's Research Advocate Committee through NIH, which she will tell you more about, the Breast Core Cancer Care Delivery Research Committee, and Cardiotoxicity Working Group. In addition, she serves on several national grant review committees and advisory panels as a patient representative, including for the FDA, or the Federal Drug Administration, the Department of Defense's Breast Cancer Research Program, the Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation's Army of Women Scientific Advisory Committee, and the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute's inaugural advisory panel on the assessment of prevention, diagnosis, and treatment options, which is actually how we were introduced to her through our project officer at PCORI. So it's always wonderful to network through people who are involved in research in all kinds of ways. Ms. Madden blogs at Musings of a Cancer Research Advocate, which you can find by Googling her name. I found that myself. And she's also a regular contributor to the American Journal of Managed Care's contributors page and their evidence-based oncology journal. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Deborah. We're not yet able to hear you talking. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Okay. Okay. Is it the password gate? Do I type that? I can't get on the web.
Hi, I'm not sure who's trying to dial in, but we actually can hear you. And if you're able to please direct any questions using the chat box or the Q&A to our staff, we will try
I can't get inside the webinar. It keeps saying that the Google Chrome web address can't work.
Okay, so you'll certainly be able to, if you can hear me talking, you'll be able to hear all the presentations, and then a recording will be available for archive. So it's possible that that we'll need to ask you to please just listen in today, and then send us an email, and we will make sure that you are directed to the archived webinar so that you can view the slides and listen along another time. Deborah, are you there?
Hello?
Deborah?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I was talking and I unmuted myself and my phone, of course, decided not to work. I am so sorry, everybody.
No worries. We struggle with technology all the time, but it's you got the floor.
Is it okay if I jump in again?
Please.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. So we have fulfilled the requirement for technical difficulties, so that's behind us. And what I had said when nobody could hear me was I was just saying how wonderful the first presentation was and how much I learned, and I hope that I'll be able to share helpful resources with all of you. As the introduction said, I am a two-time cancer survivor. I was originally diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma in the late 1980s at the age of 22. So my perspective, really, my entire adult life has been that of a cancer survivor. Over the ensuing years, I have gone on to develop a number of serious late effects of my original treatment, primarily from the chest radiation that I had as a young woman, and that included cardiotoxicities. It began with thyroid issues, and ultimately, just about 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was at that point that I figured somebody was trying to give me a message that I needed to really get involved. And I remember I actually wrote a little article about this for the Department of Defense Breast Cancer Research Program, but I had just had my bilateral mastectomies, and I was sitting in front of the fire, recovering, feeling sorry for myself, and I had an epiphany. My aunt had also had breast cancer many years before and had sent me a bunch of newsletters, and there was a story in one of the newsletters. I'm a voracious reader and have been trying to read everything I could about breast cancer, but I had a hard time reading any personal stories. It was just too close to home. I hated that anybody had to go through this. But I finally started to read a personal story in one of these newsletters, and there was an article about a young woman who had been diagnosed with breast cancer and how she decided to become an active cancer research advocate. She wanted to take something really positive out of her experience, and she started talking about how she went about doing that. And she specifically mentioned a program that I'm going to mention from the National Breast Cancer Coalition called Project LEAD, that brings people together who want to become active cancer research advocates and teaches them about the science. It's a very intense program. And all of a sudden, that was my epiphany. I didn't feel sorry for myself anymore. I had a mission that I was going to do this. I was going to get through my treatment, and then I was going to apply to Project Lead, and I was going to see where it took me. And that was just about 9 years ago. And that was the beginning of my journey. And I learned a number of lessons along the way, and I hope that I can share some of them with you today. But really the two major areas that I wanted to quickly talk about was how we as survivors and advocates and caregivers can become meaningfully involved with research from the very beginning. How can we get a seat at the table where we are helping to determine those research questions that are actually being asked? You know, there are so many wonderful research brains out there, and the investigators have these fascinating research questions that they're posing. But at the end of the day, are these research questions the right questions for those of us who are survivors and patients? We need a seat at that table to help give a reality check about what is really important, what should we be researching, and then taking it all the way through the clinical trial spectrum, ultimately into clinical practice. So how do we get that seat at the table? And the second issue that I would really like to talk about, and I could talk about it for hours, but don't worry, I won't. It's about the importance of, as you're becoming an advocate, becoming an informed consumer of medical care and developing what has been called critical health literacy. And what that is really is the ability to locate truly robust information, comprehend its relevance, and access it and assess it critically and effectively. So how do you critically analyze this information? Is this robust evidence? What are the potential benefits, harms, and limitations? And how do you develop this knowledge? How do you develop these skills? Okay, and I'm trying to turn the slide. Oh, there we go, great. Okay, so the National Cancer Institute has already been mentioned, and one of the areas that I have become involved with is as a member of the ECOG Akron NCI Cooperative Group Cancer Research Advocate Committee. And how does one become involved with that? Well, first of all, many of you on the call are probably familiar with the co-op groups, but there are several throughout the country. And ECOG Akron is one of the largest. And in order to become a member, you do to be nominated by an advocate member who is already sitting on the committee. But what do these advocates do? With ECOG Akron, all of us are survivors. I believe some of the co-op groups, you can be caregivers as well. And in addition to serving on the patient rep committee, we also serve on disease-specific committees. So I serve on the breast core, and when I'm able, on the lymphoma core. But also there are a number of more far-reaching committees, and the advocates can become members essentially of any committee that they would like to. So I am involved with the Cancer Research Delivery Committee, and also a new cardiotoxicity working group was created not that long ago, and I was asked to join as one who has experienced these personally, and I'm very, very excited about the research that we're conducting on that. So the thing is, as an advocate, we really are involved meaningfully. We are there, again, at the development of the research questions. We're involved in the protocol development. We're involved in recruitment. We're also involved in creating patient educational materials, making sure that informed consent truly inform patients. So if anybody on the call is interested in becoming involved with the cooperative groups, I do encourage you to reach out to me. And really the co-op groups, that's just one aspect of different ways you can get involved with the National Cancer Institute. Throughout my slides, I've tried to include information on websites so that you can go and get more information to learn more. The Food and Drug Administration, it's also a wonderful way to get involved as an advocate. After I attended Project Lead, this was really the first thing that I did as an advocate. I was very honored to be nominated as a patient representative. You can also self-nominate. If you go and you check out their site, there's great information on being a patient rep. But basically, there are patient reps for many different areas of cancer, as well as other diseases, including rare diseases. And you essentially serve as an ad hoc member of advisory committees. So let's say a drug is up for review for a new indication, or maybe they're looking at taking an indication away, which has happened. They have you prepare beforehand, where you are getting a great deal of documentation from the FDA as well as from the drug sponsor. So there is a lot of work involved. I do want to stress that there is a level of commitment there, and it is all volunteer. If you become a patient representative, you need to go through a process where you essentially become a special government employee, and they do conflict of interest checks. They also give you a great deal of training, which is wonderful. And when you serve on these committees, what I want to stress is that you are a voting member. There are some folks on the committee, I believe industry representatives, who may also be ad hoc members, but they do not have a vote. But you have one vote, just like the chairman does. And it's really, it's tough to describe what an incredible experience it is. You're at that panel representing the patient voice, and it's a critical voice. And if anybody is interested in maybe becoming a patient representative, I encourage you to reach out to me. And also, please do go to the FDA's website because they have some fantastic information. I have earlier mentioned the Department of Defense Breast Cancer Research Program. That's just one of several research programs that the DoD has. The Breast Cancer Research Program happened to be the very first. What was really unique, though, about this is that all of their programs are dedicated to meaningfully involving what they call consumer reviewers, which are essentially patient representatives, because we, again, bring the reality check to the table. So for every grant review session that they have a particular number of consumer reviewers in addition to the clinicians and the scientific investigators and other experts that they have on the panel. And again, you are full voting members, and you are given a certain number of proposals to review. On every proposal, there is one consumer reviewer and typically two scientific reviewers, and you present your case on how you are rating a particular grant based on a number of different criteria. They also give you a great deal of training, and they also stress that as a patient representative, you do not need to know all of the ins and outs of the science. Having some background, of course, is helpful, but it's not a requirement because you are bringing your invaluable perspective. And one of the most satisfying experiences I've had as an advocate is when I could see that I moved the direction of a conversation. There was a research proposal where the question was very exciting and interesting. However, as I mentioned before, in this particular case, I stressed the fact that it would be unfortunately problematic for patients. It involved very invasive procedure, and I was worried that the reality was that it wouldn't go anywhere and that it ultimately was not answering an important question for patients. And scientists on the grant panel changed their minds because they were hearing from somebody who, again, brought a reality check. So if you're interested, again, please go to their website. There are two levels of review. One is peer review, where you are looking at the entire proposal and you are reviewing the science based on certain criteria. And there is also programmatic review, where it's already gone through peer review, and you're assisting in determining which grants are awarded based on that particular award mechanism and that profile. Quickly, PCORI was already mentioned. This is one of the newer institutes, and it focuses on patient-centered outcomes, just like the title says. There are numerous ways to become involved with PCORI. You can become a merit reviewer. They also have a mentor program once you've been a reviewer yourself to help other patient stakeholders. You can go on their website and you can comment on some of the work that they've done. You also have the opportunity to actually input specific research questions, and you can self-nominate or have somebody else nominate you to become a member of one of their advisory committees, and there are multiple committees. So I'm sure that for everybody on this call, there's an opportunity out there for you with PCORI if you're interested. Okay, Cochrane it's a remarkable organization. It's all volunteer, and they focus on helping to bring together very robust evidence And again, they have a number of opportunities to become involved. They have experts from across the entire spectrum. They're international. They have a variety of resources on their site. And again, I wanted to include a link here just to show the different ways that you may become involved. And I wish there were more time because I could obviously talk a lot more about these resources and others, but I also wanted to quickly share some resources with you about how do we really become informed healthcare consumers and robust cancer research advocates. And fortunately, there are a wealth of resources out there. I mentioned the National Breast Cancer Coalition. I do want to tell you that in some cases, some folks with other types of cancer have applied for their institute and did participate. And again, this is a very intense 5 or 6 day course where they have staff who basically are coming from the NCI, the FDA, the DOD, active investigators. Their faculty is second to none, and they are covering all different aspects of cancer biology. They do focus, of course, on breast cancer, but they also are talking about really basic cancer, epidemiology, genomics. They also talk about clinical research, and they also help give you the tools for becoming an advocate. And I just wanted to say that my first experience as an advocate was applying for Project Lead. It was like I had been accepted to college all over again. Well, when I was accepted for Project Lead, I was ecstatic. And I've often told the story where I walked into that room at Project Lead out in Colorado, having traveled on a plane for the first time myself. Shy, I was nervous, I didn't know anybody, I was intimidated. At the end of those 6 days, I had walked in as a shy cancer patient, and I walked out as a cancer research advocate with a network of incredible people and friends who will be my lifelong friends. And if you haven't had an opportunity to look into the NBCC and Project Lead and programs like it, I strongly encourage you to do so. Also, please do go to their website. They have an online center with a wealth of resources, and they have a number of webinars so that you can see what Project Lead may be like. And it's just a wonderful way to educate yourself about cancer overall. As I mentioned before, the FDA also has a number of resources, including for those who are interested in becoming a patient representative, but there are other very helpful resources, including a regular newsletter and webinars. The Research Advocacy Network is also a phenomenal organization where they have a series of white papers. They really are dedicated to helping people take their passion for research and, again, become involved from the very beginning, setting the research agenda and getting a seat at the table where research decisions are made. They have, again, a wealth of advocate resources, so I would encourage you to go there as well. And also, I would be remiss if I did not mention Cochrane's online course. It's several sessions, so it does take a bit of time. I believe Project Lead may be a prerequisite for you to take this before you get on a plane and go. But it focuses on what is evidence-based research in medicine, and it's really a wonderful foundation, and anybody can sign on and take the course. Health News Review is the editor of that. His name is Gary Schwitzer, I believe is pronounced. And what he and his team does, and there are about 50 folks who volunteer and assist him, so they go through all of the medical stories, all the health stories that are in the popular media, and they rate them on how robust the information is that they are offering, how honest it is, and they pose a series of questions and rate it, and they help you critically analyze all those stories that you're hearing on the news. And actually, my blog was mentioned before. I spent a lot of time on my blog writing about how a lot of the health information is not presented appropriately in the popular media, unfortunately, but this can help you learn how to review. And of course, the Association of Healthcare Journalists is another wonderful resource. And I hope I didn't talk too long. I encourage you to contact me with any questions or if there's any way I can be of assistance. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deborah. That really gave us so many different things to learn about, and I appreciate that you just offered to 26 people listening in that they're welcome to contact you. I imagine your email box is going to fill up quite quickly. Our final panelist is Cindy Cisneros, who I mentioned has served as an advisory board chair of the GW Evaluating Cancer Survivorship Care Models study, and it's the role through which we got to know each other and are still working together. She currently serves as Vice President of Education Programs for the Committee for Economic Development, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, business-led public policy organization that delivers well-researched analysis and reasoned solutions to our nation's most critical issues. She previously held roles as a principal research analyst at the American Institutes for Research and director of member practice at the Public Education Network. Ms. Cisneros is a cancer survivor advocate as well, and that's the role she will talk to you about now.
Thank you so much to both Sarah and Hema for the opportunity to be invited on this call today, and really appreciate the chance to participate in such an important conversation and topic. I am going to try and consolidate some of the information to share, and really want to help amplify some of the terrific pieces of information and strategies you've just heard from Deborah as well as Sarah in terms of their presentations. So as a 14-year survivor, I just really want to emphasize to you the primary message, which is the title of this first slide. Yes, you can. And I mean in the sense of, yes, you can get involved, you can advocate, you can participate and influence research. So in terms of my own story, I was really, really clear that after my treatment was completed, I knew immediately, similar to what Deborah was describing in terms of her story, that I really wanted to help others traveling this same path. There were a number of things that I observed in different medical institutions and having different oncologists. And I thought, wow, if only I had known A, B, and C, in advance. So that really, really propelled me in terms of thinking about some type of service role. And I also wanted to figure out a venue to share my many opinions that I've developed throughout the course of this journey. So in terms of thinking about, wow, what are the possible, pathways to really kind of jump in? And I had considered a lot of different avenues in terms of, do I really want to work in the particular industry in some capacity, like as a patient navigator, which at that time was really in its earliest stages in terms of a position in centers and hospitals? Did I want to, possibly, become an advocate, work for a national association? I'd actually applied to the Livestrong Foundation because they really did focus on survivors and survivorship. Did I want to consider volunteering? Did I want to consider some type of support in terms of a healing practice, or integrated therapy? Did I want to consider, research was definitely in the arena as well. So I really did consider a number of different options, and as part of that exploration process, just taking the first step and, reaching out. So one of the places that I reached out to locally when I had moved back to Washington, D.C., was the George Washington Cancer Institute or the Cancer Center, and had a wonderful conversation with Ann Willis at that time, and just, shared my story and just offered to be of help and of support, in some capacity. And it was really fantastic that, A, she made time for me and listened, and, said that she would definitely follow up. So even though I was thinking about different ways to try and become more actively involved and starting to ask questions, one recommendation is just to really be patient in that process, because things can take time to develop. And one consideration is really just to assess where you are at in terms of your health and treatment and what stage, and what kind of time and effort that you really have to give in this capacity. So a couple of months after that conversation with GWCC and Ann Willis, I get a phone call. And so it was fantastic to have my first real entree in the arena of research and having this opportunity to participate on this advisory board for this amazing project that was examining cancer survivorship models of care. So it was really right in the same, I felt it was really serendipity. I wanted to get involved in some way. It was focusing specifically on survivors and different types of models of care, and having been in, several different states, several different institutions, feeling like I could really contribute and give some feedback. And some of you might be thinking, well, yes, I might be interested in sharing that experience too, but getting involved on the research side, that can be kind of a scary proposition. A bunch of scientists and PhDs, and, it's difficult. The medical field, as you all well know, speaks a very different language. And so it's the communication component to me was of concern in the sense that, we're going to be able to understand each other. Is this, going to make any sense? But I really, really encourage you to know that being able to share your story in your own words in plain English really does count for a lot, and that you will be understood. You don't have to worry just because you don't have a PhD, or that you're not a scientist, that you're not going to understand what's going on. So I just really want to affirm that those are not requirements. As far as I'm concerned, you already have your PhD. It's in survivorship. So it's just as valid as your perspective, being in the real world, having experienced different types of treatments and facilities. So in terms of once you're kind of getting more familiar and trusting, your own story, your own voice, and exploring the different, types of things that you can do, and with research in particular, I just really want to help emphasize that what you've been through counts. What you know matters. And in terms of, good policies that do get made from research, good policy has to be based on good research and good practice. So it's something I actually deal with in my regular day job. It's a different kind of educational policy. And so you really have to have input from the field, from the folks who are living and breathing this every single day, to give feedback about what those experiences are. How did that medication impact me? What was it like to be a part of that clinical trial? How was my experience with the set of nurses in this particular hospital? There's lots of different areas in which you can provide feedback, and you need that input from the on-the-ground patients and survivors in that experience. So I just really want to affirm for you that your voice, what you've been through, your observations really do matter and make a difference. With respect to an advisory board role, and this was amazing just because the nature of this project that is funded by PCORI is that it was designed and intended to be a patient-centered perspective. And so it's a great opportunity. Advisory boards are really just that, being able to provide some advice, guidance, and feedbacks to the set of researchers who are conducting a particular study. So it's wonderful to be a part specifically in a PCORI-funded project because they have that lens, but that is what you bring no matter who's funding the research study. And the advisory board, our role was really to ensure that that survivor voice was integrated throughout the entire length of the study at every single stage, which has been a real joy over these past several years. And the advisory board, again, as I had mentioned, really does provide guidance and feedback at different kinds of intervals, meeting quarterly or more or less, on all the different, project tasks. A lot of questions come up, even if the research project, was defined as part of the initial proposal with an initial methodology and so forth. There are lots of questions that come up and that, would benefit by the survivor-patient experience. So that was very much incorporated. That was very much the purpose and continues to be the purpose of the advisory board, and also thinking about the thereafter of the project, in terms of disseminating that information and in what forms would be helpful. I mean, as Deborah had mentioned, the way that this topic is written about is not always the easiest to understand, in the general media. And Deborah has certainly inspired me to rethink my ideas about creating a manifesto about life as a survivor, and just sharing in the hopes of trying to influence the quality of the experience for all fellow and future survivors. And that's really what my experience has been about as part of the advisory board on this research project. So different suggestions, you've heard many already, and, I really did reach out to everyone that was in my path. That included my own doctors, my own institutions that I was a patient at. It included talking to the social worker, at the particular cancer center, talking to different national advocacy organizations. So there's different ways to influence, research and the way that these topics are examined in the larger field. So again, I just encourage you to be open, to be creative, to trust what you bring to the table, and know that there are many, many different opportunities. So, yes, you absolutely can. Just know that your voice is just as valid as the researchers. Speak up, get involved, help guide the rest of the medical community, really in directing these efforts where they're most needed, and you can really help make a great difference for cancer survivors. So I will stop there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. That's terrific. So now what I'd like to do is checking the time. We've technically only got 6 minutes left, but anyone who can stick around is certainly welcome to. Hema and I will stay in the room until we get kicked out. The first question I'd actually like to kind of call from the questions that came in during registration is if any of the panelists are able to talk about really how researchers can effectively recruit patients and how patients can make meaningful connections with researchers. Cindy talked about reaching out, and Deborah also gave a number of different examples of how to do that. But if anyone on the panel can talk about how researchers can better cultivate these relationships and be open so that when individuals reach out, they can get a response.
This is Cindy. I think it's really important for researchers to make non-researchers feel comfortable. I think trying to convey that they are both interested and appreciate the experience of their survivor matters, so that should be part of any consideration in terms of having a conversation. And, maybe even inviting, a group to, group of survivors to come on in for a chat or or doing it over a conference call to just get a better feel for having some type of direct contact. So instead of doing this over email, either, on a phone call so you could hear people's voices or face-to-face, because that helps begin to, I think, build some trust.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd like to open the floor, and so if anyone else, any of our participants, would like to ask a question, they're welcome to use the hand-raising feature, and we'll unmute you, or you can chat in a question. And let me just give a moment to see if anybody would like to raise their hand or chat in a question. Okay, well, while we're waiting, let me also ask our panelists, a question that came from a couple of people is specifically about the involvement of survivors from racial, ethnic, linguistic minority communities, historically marginalized communities such as people with public insurance or LGBTQ populations, for example. Are our panelists aware of any specific efforts being made to help connect survivors from those communities who want to be involved with research participation opportunities?
This is Deb. I had mentioned before the MCI cooperative groups. Most of them, I believe, do have committees that focus on that. And we actively work to recruit folks from different minorities to participate as research advocates as well. So that's one avenue. There also are a number of voluntary or nonprofit organizations that are out there that do focus on particular minority populations to try and improve the information that is out there about research and to increase engagement. And I believe, I'm not positive about this, but I would think that there are some patient navigators who also would be able to provide resources, perhaps locally, to assist folks, to help engage additional folks from minority populations.
This is Sarah Chang. I just want to add to that. That was some excellent background. A couple of the Office of Minority Health within Health and Human Services, they are focusing on several areas on clinical trial recruitment in various communities and messaging that works there. Additionally, I know that there are several partnerships with African American churches and Latino community centers in several areas. So you may have a church or a community center in an area that may be looking more at messaging for recruitment for clinical trials.
Thank you. This is Sarah Raskin again. I actually want to also mention that on our GATE website, cancergate.org, there is what we call practice-based insight, a PBI, on a project that was developed in Texas to help recruit Latino populations into clinical trials that involved a curriculum to help open up those opportunities for recruitment. I also saw a question come in about specific local agencies, and the participant was interested specifically in the Philadelphia area. But I would also broaden this question to incorporate another question from registration about what local or state cancer coalitions or partner agencies can do to help bolster the recruitment of survivors into research roles. So if our experts have any thoughts on what state coalitions and state organizations or local organizations can do to help bolster recruitment.
I think it's a part, this is Cindy. I think one strategy is actually doing some outreach to any local cancer institutes or hospitals to let them know and encourage, doctors who are conducting research. I think a lot of times the medical community and faculty don't realize that they have a great pool to consider in terms of recruitment right there in their own backyard. So that's one idea. Yeah.
Great, and there's a follow-up comment that just came in on the chat asking about whether it's helpful to actually go to local cancer centers or hospitals. And certainly from our position at Cancer Center, we would say yes, and indeed that is how Cindy found us. We certainly can't attest to how every cancer center or hospital, in the U.S. would receive the outreach of survivors, but it's actually a great opportunity to get to know more about their research agenda, which might be well above and beyond things like clinical trials, although those are important too. We do a lot of implementation and dissemination research here. And actually, I'd like to go to the next slide because part of our own work is a way that participants in this webinar can participate in research right now, basically. We have just completed a study called Survivorship Care Models that compares models of survivorship care at 32 different institutions in the U.S. With a very large sample of survivors, over 900 survivors enrolled, and we evaluate the care models using a patient-centered framework that was actually derived from focus groups and surveys with survivors. And we will be having a results forum where we are sharing the results of what we learned and soliciting feedback from survivors as well as clinicians and other researchers and administrators to help us understand what we are learning and to critique it as is appropriate, actually, based on your own experience, and then also to help us identify the best venues and types of products that might be disseminated, whether it's some quality improvement measures or some different ways to help move our findings into practice. So you can follow that link to register for our next evidence forum. I'd like to welcome any more comments or questions that anyone else would like to make. Feel free to raise your hand or chat them in. Okay, is there a centralized website or agency, I'm sorry, I need to scroll up, let's see. Is there a centralized website or agency that defines the many different cancer advocacy and survivor groups in the United States? Panelists, is there a centralized website or agency that individuals can go to, or if not, perhaps you can provide some search terms that they could use? Well, I will say that for anyone interested in clinical trials, there is the website clinicaltrials.gov, which anyone can go to and see if there are trials in their area related to their specific interests. I think that some of the resources that are on the slides today will help guide you to some centralized resources as well, ranging from specific agencies that conduct studies, such as those mentioned today, to some of the different advocacy and education groups that might help you find what you're looking for. Ellen, we will unmute you because we think you might have a question, which is great. I think we need to click the name and Ellen? We should be able to hear you, but we can type your question in if you want to talk. Bitly does not work. Okay, thank you for letting us know. We will get on that and send a follow-up email with a proper Bitly. Very sorry about that. Let's see. So let me open it up to just any more last comments. Oh, and I should say, make sure that when you're typing in the Bitly that it has the 2 on the end, GW results 2. Yeah, so let's see. I think it seems that we're not getting any more questions rolling in for now. So what I'd like to do then is direct everyone to our survey on this Ask the Expert, and we'll change the slide in just a moment. We are ourselves a research group, and so we welcome your feedback and your participation to help us improve our Ask the Expert series for the future. There are slides that follow our survey on this Ask the Expert that we will scroll through slowly after sharing the link to the evaluation of this event. And then we will also post the full recording on our website, cancergate.org, so that you can review it and see the slides and hear the conversation. I would again like to thank Sarah Chang, Deborah Madden, and Cindy Cisneros for their participation on this Ask the Expert. I would also like to thank my colleague, Hannah Lane, who really put together this event. Oh, I just saw a comment. Excellent. Susie, thank you for mentioning that. National conferences such as ASCO and AACR are great ways to connect with researchers, and they offer patient survivor scholarships, which can help offset the cost of participation, which I know can be onerous without a scholarship. So please do apply for the scholarships. And we really look forward to hearing your feedback and seeing you on the next event.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everybody.